Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is track 6 to HuSaCon 2025. Our first day, first speaker. Welcome, everybody. Make sure, if I have not caught you ahead of time, to give out the first free 100 people in each track swag gift. Catch me afterwards. Our first speaker today is Jim Robertson. He is presenting Data Security, the Missing Context. Jim has 10 plus years of experience in data security as an SE at Varonis, StealthBits, which networks, Splunk, IBM, and Bionic AI. He's a former network and systems engineer with MSPs in the upper Midwest. He has a broad experience in deploying and securing systems and data, and he is a recognized thought leader in data security, posture management, and practical security challenges. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everybody. Everybody got the coffee? Good to go? It's early. Yeah, I'm Jim Robertson. I'm pre-sales engineering director at Concentric AI. Anybody heard of Concentric AI in the crowd? All right. I'm here to talk about data security and what we call the missing context, right? I've been working in and around security for quite a while, and it's always kind of surprised me that we buy all these tools, we do all these things, but no one actually knows what the data is, right? You can throw rules and regular expressions at something, and you can find what looks like a social security number or looks like a credit card, but no notion of what it actually is. Right, and it's always made things a little more challenging, especially in the DLP arena, and we'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about AI. I just walked around the floor, you guys may have too, and there's, I don't know, 50 vendors selling AI, right? It's kind of the heady days of AI, right? Reminds me of the cloud. When we were selling the cloud, everything was the cloud, right? Whatever I was selling, that was the cloud. You need some, have fun, right? So AI has come on strong lately, as you're all aware, but the technology and techniques and science behind it started in 1949. Does anybody know that? Coming out of World War II, you guys saw that movie Imitation Game, right, where they cracked the German coder, right? And so that was where it really kind of started. Someone took that ball and ran with it after the war and came up with this notion of natural language processing, right? Applying, technology to read and understand text, right? The understand part wasn't that good. Somewhere around 1960, we invented language models as a way to represent language in computer speak. Then there was machine learning, long short-term memory, which sounds like a contradiction, right? But it was designed to help these technologies not get lost. Right, it was a way to keep them on track, right? Word embeddings came around 2011, and then in 2017, we had something called transformer neural networks, which basically started everything, right? Our company was founded right after that, but transformer neural networks is what's enabled Copilot, ChatGPT, everything you're seeing right now, all the Gen AI. So this isn't new stuff, it's just been developing. So why all the hype, right? What does this really matter? Well, we all know that the first one's my favorite. Who doesn't want to read a document and ask Copilot to summarize it, right? Who doesn't want to write that email, right? Have ChatGPT write that for you, right? My wife basically does her job with ChatGPT now, which I just shake my head. Right? She'll put literally anything out there, right? Customer service chatbots, not a fan, right? Not a fan at all, right? I had a problem with an Amazon order, and I was arguing with a chatbot yesterday in my hotel room. I'm like, there's no way to call them anymore. There's literally no way to call them and talk to a human, right? Fast food robots. Anybody gotten a robot to make their fast food? Is that happening around here? It's not happening where I live in Wisconsin. I live right in the middle of the state, little town called Wausau, so full disclosure, I am a Packers fan. Any Cowboys fans here? Yeah, sorry about that game the other night. All right, it was a draw, okay? But they're also doing some odd things. Anybody see an article on robotic insects? They're trying to design insects that can go out and pollinate plants because, you know, we have a problem with honeybees, apparently, right? Kind of reminds me of Hunger Games and the Tracker Jackers, right? Like, I don't know if it's a good idea. Or the military's got robot dogs with machine guns on it. We all watched the movie, right? What happens? It kills us, right? And so certain things about this seem a little scary. Others seem really interesting and convenient. And it's kind of going in a lot of different directions right now. And I don't think we even know where this is going to end up. But it's not just a force for good. You guys all work in security? Yeah? Well, that's why you're here, right? You've experienced some of these AI-generated phishing attacks and things like that going on where they're now using this to spoof us and fool us and steal our information. The politicians are using it for propaganda and disinfo. We've got deep fakes out there, which are getting better and better, right? It's going to get to the point where you really won't know, right? I've been watching some of that stuff. It's just crazy. And data leakage. We have a lot of public Gen AI out there that people like to use, but sometimes people users don't think about what they put in there is gone forever, right? Once that public Gen AI consumes it, it's there. It doesn't forget it. So there's some issues. What is going on here? What does this have to do with data security? Great question, all right? Who would agree with this? How many of you have been sold security solutions that made a lot of promises but didn't really deliver? Right? Snake oil, right? And there are a lot of promises out there, right? Every year, every other couple of years, there's something new and amazing that we're supposed to get, right? We're going to do more security. We're going to buy this other tool. We're going to put it in, right? But why is it snake oil? I would say on the data security side, it's probably because of this. All technologies out there that you're using up until now typically have a bunch of complex rules, regular expressions, or you got to feed data samples into a model and scan it, look at it, correct it, rinse and repeat and over again. But you never really get to any sort of clarity on what your situation actually is, right? You can find social security numbers, that's easy enough. Look for 9 digits. Look for all the variations you might see. Look for the word social security number, SSN, something like that in a file. Probably a social security number. But we all know that it will also find social security numbers that aren't social security numbers, right? That's the nature of the beast. These rules and these regular expressions and these data samples, they don't really understand the data. So they're designed to be a wide net. Right? The reason you have false positives and the reason that exists in there is because the mindset is if I'm going to find social security numbers in your environment, I'm going to find anything that might look like one, right? It's precision and recall. It's a trade-off. So you're going to grab everything that looks like a social security number, throw it into that bucket, and then you're going to get a list of files, usually, in your environment that perhaps may contain social security numbers, right? But it'll find them in a purchase order, right? And then margin purchasing can't send her email because something's picking up that there's sensitive data in there, right? So she gets mad, she files a ticket, she starts yelling, and what do you as a human have to do? Go look at it, right? And you can usually figure out very quickly, no, this is a purchase order, or this is an inventory spreadsheet. This is something that has nothing to do with social security numbers, and therefore that's a false positive, right? We've been managing this for 15, 20 years this way. Everybody's kind of used to it, right? But is it the best way? Probably not. So what ends up happening? Well, because these pattern detection methods can really only find patterns, that's all we look for. When people talk about sensitive data, most of the time they mean PII or PCI, right? And then we start ignoring the things that we can't really find, which are on the bottom there. Anybody have proprietary information in your organization? What about patents? chemical formulas, marketing and expansion plans. What we find in all these industries is that there's all manner of sensitive data in an environment that's sensitive in the business sense, right? It has nothing to do with PII, right? If I'm looking for patent information in your environment, how am I going to find that with regular expression? How am I going to find that with patterns? You're not. So for the most part, that's been ignored. Or we depend on locations and file names, and we say everything in this share or everything in this SharePoint site or these file names are that information, which for the most part is a safe assumption, but not always. If you don't know the context of your data, any data discovery project initiative that you're trying to do is pointless. And there's a few reasons why, right? So say you're trying to do data governance, right? We have a lot of customers that they use us for data governance as well as data security. But if you're trying to govern data, right, set up a plan, if you don't know what the data is, that's your first challenge, and you don't. Is it where it's supposed to be? I don't know. Hope so. And who's responsible for it? Not sure. There's all manner, like you see files out there generated by some process, turned into a PDF, saved out there. Some random digits and numbers as a file name. You know what that is? No. Neither do I, right? If it's in the finance folder, we might assume it's finance information. But what if it's out in someone's OneDrive? No idea what that might be. And if you're trying to do data security, just translate that over to the security side, right? What kind of data is at risk? You know, I spent a lot of time at Varonis and StealthBits back in the day. We'll just put it that way, right? Everything was still primarily on-prem, right? People had big servers, they had NAS devices, they had folders and shares defined on the network. You know, finance had one, legal had one, HR had one, and we had groups that we managed that gave access, right? So we had a read-only group, we had a read-write group, and there wasn't really anything in the cloud at that point, right? So it was kind of manageable, right? You could actually do okay. But what were we worried about back then? Open shares. You know, people creating shares and not removing everyone, right? Or letting domain users have access to it, you know, making those kind of sloppy mistakes. That was kind of what we focused on, right? But if you don't know what data you have, how do you know that your remediation or protection efforts are any good? Right? You can assume, right? You can buy that new super tool that's AI enabled, that's going to help you do all those things. But if you don't know what the data is, good luck, right? And how many people are looking at classifying data with something like MIP labels? Anybody doing that internally? Who do you have doing it? Users? We all know users will do it, right? They do it just the way they should, right? They mark it public so they can share it, is what they do, right? So that doesn't really work, right? So our security seems to be in a vacuum, right? Without context, so to speak. Well, AI is here to kind of change the game, right? Our company was founded on this prospect, and we'll talk about what we can actually do once we understand the context. How many people have ever tried to do data discovery? How'd it go? What'd you do? Ask users what data they had? How accurate do you think it was when you're done?
Maybe 75%. Oh,
right. Right. So data discovery is the foundation of doing anything with data security.
Thank you.
But data discovery has been where everything falls over, right? And if you're not doing effective data discovery, then how do you know where your risk is, right? What is your risk? If information's shared inappropriately with external users, and you don't even know what kind of information it is, you can't really determine is that appropriate or not, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What about remediation? When you get to fixing problems, how do you know where your real problems are, right? How do you remediate that? How do you take steps to make sure that the right access is available to only the people that need it, right? And that people are only sharing information externally that's appropriate, or that they're putting things into Gen AI that they should, right? And what about DLP? Who does DLP here? How's that going? Really, why? Why would you say that?
Thank you. Well, oh, wow. Okay. So it's really time intensive and resource intensive, not only on the budget side, but then also on the actual user side with the teams. There needs to be a true partnership between cybersecurity and the IT department so that we're able to actually identify these data, tune DLP, because it just needs constant tuning and tweaking. And you feel like you're always working on it. So that's why I say you really need dedicated people just to DLP.
Does that sound pretty common for most folks? You have to throw people at it, right? Because you don't know what the data is. That's basically what you just said. And you have to tell the DLP system what the data is. Or you have to try and tune the DLP system, which is using what? Rules, regular expressions, patterns, things like that. You know, looking at something on the fly and hoping that you're catching what you need to catch. But all it can really semi-reliably find is PII, right? So that's typically where DLP stops, right? I liken modern DLP to something like this. Loss prevention, right? Big thing in retail. So Best Buy has people there making sure you don't steal something, right? But what if their loss prevention was some dude out front who came inside the store and said something like this? Hey, someone just grabbed an 80-inch TV. They didn't pay for it. They stuck it in their truck and they drove off. How would you feel about your loss prevention right there, right? And how many times does DLP turn into an after-the-fact alert telling you something bad probably happened? Maybe you should go and check that out, right? And that's kind of where we're at. And it's because it's not accurate enough, right? You can't do enforcement if you don't understand what the data is, right? It's hard to do. But it all starts with data discovery. Context is everything. Context is king, right? What is that? Anybody else? How long did it take you to figure out that was a resume? Not long. What made you think it was a resume? Formatting? It's got somebody's name in big letters at the top, right?
The
Professionals.
types of information.
Yeah, right? So there's a format and there's a context to this document that you can immediately recognize as a resume. Say you're trying to find a resume with your PII detection rules. What are you going to find? Name? Phone number? Maybe an address? Maybe an email address? So if you're looking at this and say this person created it and saved it in their OneDrive and it's doc1.docx, and all you know is it's got a name, phone number, and some other items in there. You have no idea that it's a resume, right? So the context of this is very important, as we'll see. So how does this really work? We talked about natural language processing, invented, created, conceived in 1949. And we saw that timeline that led up to these transformer neural networks, which is where everything you're seeing going on with Gen AI was made possible. And then we have large language models, right? Everyone knows about large language models as a way to, like, I can go to Copilot. I can go to ChatGPT. I can ask it a question. It'll give me an answer, right? This is great stuff, right? But it can also be used for another purpose. This is what we do with large language models, all right? What you're looking at here is a group, let's picture a set of documents, right? It could be SharePoint, file servers, OneDrive, wherever they might be. We're going to be able to tell you that you have these clusters of similar documents, right? Some of them are finance related. Underneath finance, we've got tax returns and invoices and budgets. Same thing with legal, same thing with HR. Also see some clusters up there, 1-114, 1-83. Those are documents that we've determined are similar in nature. They just don't have a name yet. We haven't given them a model, right? So the way we look at and process data is we take all of your information, we run it through large language models, transformer neural networks, and we produce something that we call an embedding. The embedding is 512 floating point numbers that mathematically encapsulate the meaning of a document, okay? It's all data science kind of stuff. We were founded in 2018, right after the transformer neural networks came out. And the founders had this idea that they could take any corpus of documents, any organization, and they could leverage this technology to arrange documents by similarity. That's literally what we do at its simplest level. We generate these embeddings, we put them in groups, kind of like Sesame Street. These things are alike, they're in groups, and there's groups inside of groups. And then we've developed models against those embeddings that can put these things in the appropriate bucket, right? So what you end up with is a view of your information that tells you what it is, which has been the missing piece all along, right? No one's actually knows what their data is. We can tell you what it is. We can find your proprietary information. We can find your secret board documents. We can find anything. We'll find it, we'll cluster it together. We have a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities with models for things that are common, legal, HR, and finance. But everything you have will be clustered by similarity. And it's a really simple process to generate a model. When it comes to training models, after we've scanned your data, the models are already trained. Some of them have names, some of them don't. So it's a simple process to go through and look at a group of similar things and say, I want to call these whatever. Give them a name, right? Once you've got the name, now you've got the context, and now you can start operating on that data based on what it actually is. A little brief, picture of our solution, right? What we can do is we'll give you an interface where you can look at those categories, you can drill down in those categories. You can set up risk policies and track risk for your high-risk data, right? So you can find this information, and of course we're going to layer in everything else you want, which is doesn't contain PII, right? Who has permission to it? How are they sharing it? What are they doing with it activity-wise? All of those things will be factors, but it's always going to be in the context on the top of what that information actually is. What does this mean for you? If you know what your data is, how would you approach something like retention, right? Everybody's got a retention policy. We keep the finance data for 7 years. We keep the HR data for 3 years, stuff like that. But actually doing the retention has always kind of fallen over as well. Why? We talked about it a bit before. We asked the users to do it. You tell the finance department, hey, go out there, find all your documents that are over 7 years old, and get rid of them. Do they know where they are? No. They have no idea where they are. They know where some of them are, where they're supposed to be, but what about the things that aren't? So how do you do retention effectively if you don't know where all your finance data is? Well, we can do something interesting like filter down to all your finance data, filter down to something like last modified date greater than 7 years, and I can produce a list in your environment of all the financial information that we've uncovered that's over 7 years old. Additionally, we can do something like pick it up, move it, maybe you drop it into a lockdown area you set up for finance, right? You create this little place for them, it's all locked down, we can pick that data up that meets this criteria, we can put it in that environment, you could send a notification to the data custodians for the financial data, and you can point them right to the data that they need to deal with and not depend on them going and tracking it down, right? Same thing with duplication, life cycle, right? How do you know how this information is developed over time, right? Like there was an original document, then copies were made, modified copies were made, branches and branches, and all this data that's essentially related is strewn all over the place. How do you know whether or not it's related? Well, we've also got a lineage in our data, in our solution, where we'll show you the different pieces of the puzzle. These are all the documents that are related. Someone made a copy, someone made changes and saved a different copy. We can figure all that out. We'll also pick up activity as that's going along, so you'll know if someone's viewed it, someone's downloaded it, someone's attached it to an email. You can have all the information you need to understand how data of certain types is going in your environment, where it went, where it came from, all those kinds of things. Flip over to security. Access control. That used to be simpler, as I was talking about before, right? It used to be out in the network, it used to be in a share. You could semi-reliably assume that that was where the information was. You had control over the groups. And then they invented this thing called SharePoint and other technologies, and now users have access and control over this data and what they're doing with it, right? Now you can put some controls in place, but users are going to do what users are going to do, and that data is going to be anywhere. So if you wanted to control access to your finance data, first off, you got to know where it all is. You got to know if people are sharing that with their personal email addresses. Are they sending financial reports to personal email domains? Are they uploading them to ChatGPT? Not saying they will, but they do. And all this activity going on, right? You can monitor what users are doing with documents, and you can see what they're actually attempting to do. And then you can kind of get toward, I would say, more effective data loss prevention. So if I were able to tell you with high reliability and accuracy the kinds of information you have in your environment, even your proprietary data, you give it your name and stuff like that, and then I were to say, take your MIP labels, map them to your categories, and put policies in place that will go out to your environment for certain kinds of information, mark some of it public, mark some of it internal use only, mark it confidential, mark it restricted, highly confidential. Now you're going to, from a security standpoint, DLPs can all read those labels, every one of them, right? So instead of trying to get DLP to figure out what it is on the way out the door and not getting it right, what if DLP rules could simply say, this is marked internal, therefore it can't leave the building, right? That's one of the things that we've seen. A lot of customers that struggle with something like DLP, they were able to access what we can, take what we can do, map it to labels, and greatly simplify that. That also works for Copilot. I started at Concentric AI 3 years ago. I was the only SC for about 2 years. So a lot of conversations with organizations, and frankly, it revolved around PII and PCI, right? The 3 Ps, right? Help me find this privacy data, because that's literally all anybody could ever find. And so I was, busy doing what I'm supposed to do, telling them about this new thing we could do and how great it was and why it should matter. And a lot of times, I got this, nobody really cared about the categories. Last year, Copilot came on strong. I think it had to do something with the Olympics. There were a lot of commercials on the Olympics, and I just picture, bosses coming in, get me some of that Copilot, right? We started having different conversations. Security teams wanted to talk to us because leadership had given them 90 days to roll out Copilot. And they were a little nervous, right? Why is that? Microsoft markets Copilot as security aware, right? Great. And then they explain that. Well, it's only going to use the data a user has access to. Most security teams go. Because the dirty little secret has always been access has always been over permissive, right? People change roles, they keep permissions. People get access to all manner of stuff. Plus, SharePoint's proclivity for making the default sharing link organization-wide, right? You can change it to user, but it defaults to organization-wide. I send them all the time, which meant anyone in the organization could use the link. Well, that wasn't that big of a problem because you didn't know those links existed, right? You couldn't go out and really search for them, right? You couldn't browse SharePoint and show me, hey, show me everything I have access to. It didn't work that way. Copilot did exactly that. Copilot, you ask it a question, and it would go out and access anything you possibly had access to. So if we had an over-permissive situation where you had access to something you probably shouldn't, and there were a bunch of organization links in there on documents, yeah, it would bring it right up to you. We all heard the horror stories, right? Salary information available, right? You all heard that, right? It was true, right? And so what people wanted to know was not about their PII and PCI. They still cared about that. But they were really interested in what kind of information is available for Copilot, right? What do people have access to that's business related? If you're rolling out a new product, or you're building a new facility, or you've got a new marketing campaign, and you're going to take on your competitors, and you've got this top secret internal set of information about this, and that goes missing, I would say a business impact for that is probably much larger than anything you would probably deal with for PII. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Baronis, there was a company that makes bicycles located in Wisconsin. All right, I won't tell you who it is. And Lance Armstrong back then was the man. This was before they kicked him out of cycling forever. And they were building a new $10,000 bike that was based on Lance's Tour de France bike, right? But they had saved the plans for that, and all the specs for that were saved out in SharePoint. And sure enough, some of that information, there's a pigeon walking up the aisle. Come on in, man. If I had a piece of bread, I'd throw it at you. That's awesome. But those plans went missing, right? Someone in China, where they did a lot of their manufacturing, had access to that site, got a hold of that information. Some company in China built an exact duplicate, changed a couple of things, and released it 3 months before they did. They estimated their losses in the millions for that, right? And that was back then. Same thing goes now. And they didn't find out about that till way after it happened. So what we offer is a concept of data security that actually works, right? Because we can answer these three fundamental questions. First, what sensitive data do I have? And that's way beyond PII. That's what we've been talking about. All that information in your environment that you would deem sensitive from a business standpoint, from a privacy standpoint, doesn't matter. Where is this data, right? What data is at risk? Once you know where all this sensitive data is of all these different types, then you can sit down and have a true risk assessment. You can look at all the factors that you care about, permissions, activity, remediation type things. And then how do you remediate it? An effective solution would give you a way to remediate these things. How many of you have bought any kind of data security solution that was really good at giving you a long list of things that were wrong in your environment, but no real way to fix them, right? I used to do that at Varonis all the time. I'd give you this big long report of hundreds of thousands of PII elements in your environment. And then I'd be like, good luck, right? Go clean that up, right? One time, I was doing a POV and we showed him the PII report. And he said, that's really great. He goes, I never want to see that again. I'm like, what? I was like, you should care, right? And he goes, you just gave me a list of 225,000 problems that I can't do anything about right now. And so I never saw this. I said, fair enough, right? He didn't want to deal with it. So we talked about these things, right? What's sensitive data, what's at risk, and how do I remediate those risks? So let's go back to this context thing. So if you know what your data is, let's talk about data retention and duplication, right? It's easy to know who's responsible for the data. I can find your finance data. I can find your legal data. I can find any kind of data you want, and you'll know who's responsible for it because you'll know what it is. I can map these categories to retention requirements, right? We can actually apply Microsoft's retention labels, same way we do with MIP labels. We can slap a label on that stuff. It's easy to involve the correct business stakeholders. You don't have to wonder who's responsible for some random set of data you found out there. If you know what it is, you know exactly who should be responsible for it. And on the security side, risks are easily identified to business data. Remediation efforts can be focused and targeted. Once you know where your highest risk things are, you can actually put policies in place that mitigate those risks in a measurable way. And data classification, we map the labels to the categories, so now your data classification, your MIP labels can be very accurate and relevant. And your DLP policies can be streamlined and simplified, as we talked about. This is my favorite set of slides. Watch this. Ooh, no agents, no data samples. Look at that. That robot's name is Connie, by the way, right? And no regular expressions, right? So why should you buy Concentric AI, right? I would say comprehensive discovery and remediation powered by AI. We're doing what I talked about. We're building categories, right? Visibility across everywhere, right? If it's in the cloud, if it's on-prem, structured, semi-structured, unstructured data, we can scan it. And then complete I can't say that today. We help it work, all right? Everyone gets a dedicated person to help them actually do this. Who are we? Talked a bit about that. This is our NASCAR slide. You know, we've got 300% year-over-year growth. We've got a lot of investors. Things are going really well. And we got some big customers that are using this data, right? And using it successfully. We have people that are classifying information at scale over across hundreds of terabytes with our engine. Gen AI, right? When Copilot came out and everybody was interested, you know what we had to change at our company? Nothing. Except they made a new section on the website called Copilot Readiness Assessment or something. Because the essential thing that people wanted to know, what kinds of data is involved with this? And we were able to do that, right? We did write in some functionality to collect Copilot interaction events, right? We weren't doing that, so we started picking that up. That was it. And what we've noticed now is everyone's concerned with public Gen AI, so we do have a browser DLP that can leverage those categories. You can actually project those categories into someone's endpoint, and you can set up policies to keep someone from, say, uploading financial results to ChatGPT, right, or stuff like that. So you can actually take this and make it actionable on the endpoint, because that's what people are worried about now. It's all public Gen AI. But there's also the internal piece, right, where if you're building your own internal Gen AI, say you license the technology and you're going to create your own that you're going to run in-house, what kind of data are you putting into it, right? Is it appropriate? What about the old stuff? Should that be in there? So being able to understand the kinds of information you have and look at it from, I'm going to leverage this in a pipeline, as well as who has access to it, who could leverage it, what are they going to do with it, right? The activity. It's all a piece of the puzzle where I think data security is quickly changing into Gen AI security over the next, I'd say, year or two. That's going to be basically the same thing. Microsoft's actively trying to turn your UI into Copilot, right? Where you're going to log in for your work day. You're not going to open a bunch of apps, read your emails, look through stuff. You're going to log into some Gen AI interface. That's going to summarize things for you, help you understand, help you create, help you book appointments. All those things that we want to use it for, Microsoft's going to capitalize on. And the same is going to go for anything that any company's write. It's going to turn into your primary interface as you work. This is us, right? It's continuous monitoring. You know, we scan your data, we understand it, and then we can help you identify and remediate excessive permissions and sharing, things in the wrong location, privilege escalations and abnormal activity, unclassified or misclassified data. You know, once we start looking at your data and start applying labels, users can make changes, right? We'll pick that up immediately and let you know. Someone's changed a label, and you can choose whether or not you want us to put the label back. These are the kinds of things we can remediate. I talked about not just finding problems, but actually being able to do something. We can classify it, we can manage permissions and remediate them. We can block things, I talked about that. We can mask things in the browser if you want. You can mask certain information. We can relocate it. You've got extremely sensitive information that should only be in one place. We can easily find when it's not in the right place, pick it up and move it where it needs to go. And then you got the complete, the rot, deleting data, archiving data. We can help with that as well. And we're in it with you. Every one of our customers has someone assigned to them that helps you onboard data, right? Get all your data sources in, get them scanned, start generating those embeddings in those clusters, work through the categorization piece with you, right? Help you categorize your data. They'll give it the name you want, and then they'll move right into a risk assessment with you, right? Based on your use cases, on things that we discover and uncover, we'll help you understand where your risk is. And then we're talking about, remediation at that point. Typically, out of a risk assessment, you find some things that need to be fixed now, right? So we can take care of that. The rest of it, we'll game plan with you. We'll make a project plan, help you over time, get to that least privilege type model, know where your data is, secure your data, put it in the right place, all those things that you care about. We also do regular check-ins, where every quarter, every half a year, we meet with our customers. We go through kind of a state of the union, where we kind of show you, hey, you bought this solution, and here's what we've done with it, right? And here's how much we've remediated for you. Up through last year, we had a 100% renewal rate. And I think it's because of this, because we actually help people do it, right? We don't just sell it to you, come back 10 months from now and say, it's renewal time. You guys want to expand, right? You get that a lot, right? If you want to know the general areas that we kind of apply to, this is where it is, right? Discovery, categorization, that's the core of what we do. Classification, access governance, category aware DLP, that's our browser extension, Gen AI security, deduplication, retention, privacy, and compliance, right? We've actually taken compliance standards and mapped them into our solution. So if you have to adhere to HIPAA or GDPR or NIST or whatever it might be, we'll actually map that to your data, and we'll help you understand, based on what this data actually is, how well are you doing with your compliance, right? Because most compliance standards, they're the same. Do you know where certain kinds of information is? Do you know who has access to it? How are you controlling it and governing it and monitoring it? And so we just plug that into the solution. It made a lot of sense. And that is it. Any questions? Anyone?
We have 3 minutes left for questions, so if anybody has one, let me know. And I'll get this out to you.
If you go in the door and just keep heading straight in, we're on the left, back toward the back there.
Yeah.
Stop by and talk to us, give you a quick demo or whatever it might be, all right? But thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.